Get this kid out of my courtroom before I call child services. Judge Harold Hartwell doesn't even look up from his papers as 12-year-old Maya Washington stands before the bench. Her tiny frame in a school uniform makes the packed courtroom feel like a coliseum. Your Honor, I'm here to... You're here to what? Play lawyer? The judge's voice cuts like ice. Little black girls don't get to waste my time with make-believe. Maya's hands shake as she holds her legal papers. The security guard steps forward, towering over her. Sir, I represent my father in this foreclosure case. Judge Hartwell finally looks down, his face twisted with disgust. Your daddy should have taught you to know your place instead of sending you here to embarrass yourself. The gavel crashes down with finality. Get her out, now! But Maya doesn't move. Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere because of who you are? What happened next made a room full of powerful adults realize they'd just made the biggest mistake of their careers. 3 months earlier, Maya Washington sat cross-legged on the library floor, surrounded by law books that towered over her like skyscrapers. While other 7th graders played outside, she traced her finger along pages of constitutional amendments, her lips moving silently as she memorized every word. Maya, sweetie, these books are for college students, the librarian whispered, kneeling beside her. Maybe try the children's section? Maya looked up with eyes far older than her 12 years. Mrs. Lane, did you know the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under law for all citizens? Even kids like me? The librarian stared in amazement as Maya explained due process with the precision of a law professor. This wasn't a child playing pretend. This was genius wrapped in a small package that the world refused to take seriously. Maya had been reading at this level since she was 8, consuming everything from Supreme Court decisions to federal housing regulations. Her photographic memory turned every page into permanent storage. But genius doesn't pay bills or stop foreclosure notices. At home, her father, James Washington, sat at their kitchen table, foreclosure papers spread before him like a death sentence. The single father and Army veteran stared at numbers that didn't add up, at interest rates that seemed to multiply overnight, at a loan modification he didn't remember signing. "Baby girl," he called as Maya walked through the door, her backpack heavy with borrowed law books. "We need to talk." James had raised Maya alone since her mother died when she was 5. He'd worked double shifts at his auto repair shop, went to every parent-teacher conference, helped with homework he barely understood. But he'd never had to explain to his brilliant daughter that they were about to lose everything. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Maya dropped her bag and climbed onto his lap, the same way she had since she was little. "We might have to move, sweetheart. The bank says we owe money I don't think I borrowed." Maya picked up the foreclosure notice, her young eyes scanning the legal language that would baffle most adults. "This doesn't look right, Daddy. The numbers are different from your original loan." "How do you know about loans, baby?" "I've been reading about predatory lending. It's when banks target families like ours with bad loans." Maya's voice carried a matter-of-fact tone that made James's heart swell with pride and break with worry. Across town, Judge Harold Hartwell finished his 3rd scotch at the Montgomery Country Club. The white-haired judge sat with Richard Blackstone, a wealthy developer whose construction projects had made them both rich through a system of carefully orchestrated foreclosures. "The Washington property should be cleared by month's end," Blackstone said, sliding an envelope across the mahogany table. "Your wife's consulting fee." Hartwell pocketed the money without looking. 30 years on the bench, and I've never seen these people learn their lesson. They take loans they can't afford, then cry racism when we foreclose. What if they get a lawyer? With what money? Hartwell laughed. Besides, I've never lost a case to people like them. Never will. Meanwhile, Maya stayed up past midnight, her small desk lamp illuminating federal banking regulations. She'd discovered something that made her stomach turn. Systematic fraud targeting black families across 3 counties, all approved by the same judge. "Don't worry, Daddy," she whispered to herself as she highlighted another violation. "I'm going to save us." But the legal system doesn't listen to children, even genius ones. Every law firm door slammed in their faces. Every lawyer hung up when they heard 12-year-old representative. "Maybe I should just give up," James said after their 5th rejection. "Take whatever settlement they offer." Maya looked at her father with determination that belonged to someone 3 times her age. "No, Daddy. If they won't listen to a little girl, I'll make them listen to a lawyer, and lawyers know the law." That night, Maya made a decision that would change everything. If the system wouldn't let her in, she'd force her way in with the one weapon they couldn't dismiss: perfect legal knowledge that would expose their corruption. The war was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming. The rejection hit like a slap across the face. Maya stood in the marble lobby of Crawford & Associates, the city's most prestigious law firm, watching the receptionist look down at her with barely concealed disgust. "Little girl, this isn't a daycare center. Security!" Maya's carefully prepared legal brief, written in her neat 7th-grade handwriting, was crumpled and tossed into the trash without a glance. The security guard, a mountain of a man in an ill-fitting uniform, grabbed her small shoulder. "Come on, kid. Time to go home to Mommy." "My mother is dead," Maya said quietly. "And my father needs legal representation." The guard's grip tightened. "Look, sweetie, grown-ups are working here. Go play lawyer somewhere else." As Maya was escorted to the street, she heard the lawyers inside laughing. "Did you see that little black girl with her crayon drawings? Probably thinks she's the next Thurgood Marshall." "These people never learn their place," another voice added. "Send a child to do an adult's job." The humiliation burned like acid in her throat, but this was just the beginning. At Morrison & Associates, the secretary didn't even let her speak. At Legal Aid, they told her to come back with a parent. At the public defender's office, they said foreclosure wasn't criminal law. Every door slammed. Every phone call ended in dial tones. Every email went unanswered. The legal system had built walls specifically to keep out people like the Washingtons, and those walls were holding firm. At Roosevelt Middle School, Maya's world was collapsing in other ways. In the hallway, classmates surrounded her with phones recording, their voices dripping with cruel adolescent mockery. "Look, it's our little lawyer girl. Maya thinks she's going to save Daddy with her coloring books. My mom says your family's just looking for a handout. Maybe if your dad got a real job." Akayla Mitchell, the class queen bee whose father happened to work for Blackstone Development, stepped forward with a vicious smile. "My daddy says your daddy borrowed money he couldn't pay back. That's called being poor and stupid." The circle of students tightened. Someone pushed Maya's backpack, spilling her law books across the hallway floor. As she scrambled to collect them, students kicked the books further away, laughing as constitutional law texts slid under lockers. "Look at all this fake smart girl stuff," Tyler Johnson sneered, holding up her copy of federal banking regulations. "Can you even read this, or do you just look at the pictures?" Maya's small hands clenched into fists, but she kept gathering her books. She had learned long ago that fighting back only gave them more ammunition. But the worst was yet to come. In the cafeteria, Maya sat alone with her peanut butter sandwich. They couldn't afford the hot lunch anymore, when Principal Davidson approached with a concerned expression that didn't hide his underlying condescension. "Maya, honey, the guidance counselor called me about your situation at home. We're worried you're taking on responsibilities that are too adult for you." "I'm fine, Mr. Davidson." "Now, sweetheart, playing lawyer might seem fun, but you need to focus on being a kid. Maybe we should have you talk to the school psychologist about these unrealistic expectations you're putting on yourself." The message was clear. Even the adults who were supposed to support her thought she was delusional. They saw a troubled child in denial, not a genius trying to save her family. In math class, she couldn't concentrate as Mrs. Peterson droned on about fractions while Maya's mind raced through mortgage calculations and compound interest rates. In English, she stared at the clock, watching precious hours tick away. Every minute meant they were closer to losing everything. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled her aside after class. "Maya, your grades are slipping. You seem distracted. Is everything okay at home?" How could she explain that she was racing against time to master federal banking law? While other kids worried about pop quizzes, she was trying to decode a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the local court system. "I'm fine, Mrs. Rodriguez." But she wasn't fine. That afternoon, Maya overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Two men in expensive suits stood outside her school, their voices carrying in the autumn air. One she recognized as Richard Blackstone from the newspaper photos. The other was a stranger with dead eyes and gold teeth. "The girl's becoming a problem," Blackstone said. "Word is she's been asking questions at the courthouse, looking through public records. She's 12 years old. What's she gonna do?" "Smart kids are dangerous kids. They ask the wrong questions. Make sure she understands the consequences of messing with things beyond her understanding." Maya pressed herself against the brick wall, her heart pounding as she listened to adults planning to intimidate a child. That evening, those consequences arrived with the force of a hurricane. Maya walked into her father's shop to find two men in suits waiting in the shadows. Her father stood behind the counter, his hands shaking as he pretended to organize receipts. "Maya, go to your room," James said, his voice tight with fear. "Actually, we'd like her to hear this," said the man with gold teeth. His smile never reached his eyes. "Little girl, you've been asking a lot of questions lately. Questions that might get your daddy in trouble." Maya stepped closer to her father, feeling his fear radiating like heat. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where social services take little girls away from daddies who can't provide proper homes. The kind where auto repair licenses get revoked for mysterious safety violations. The kind where certain families find themselves under investigation for things they didn't do." The threats weren't subtle. They were promises wrapped in smiles and delivered with the casual confidence of men who'd never faced consequences for their actions. "Do we understand each other?" Gold Teeth asked, his voice soft but deadly. Maya wanted to scream, to fight, to call the police, but she was 12 years old, and these were powerful men in a system designed to protect their kind of power. After they left, James collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "Baby girl, maybe we should just pack up and leave town. Start over somewhere else." "With what money, Daddy? Our car barely runs and they'll just do this to another family." "But what if they take you away from me? What if they hurt you because of my mistakes?" Maya had never seen her father cry before. The man who'd served his country, who'd worked 18-hour days to keep them afloat, who'd been her rock since her mother died, was breaking apart in front of her. The next morning brought fresh horror. Maya arrived at school to find flyers posted on every locker. Maya Washington, future welfare queen, with her school photo underneath. Someone had drawn devil horns on her head and blacked out her teeth. Students laughed and pointed as she walked down the hall. Teachers looked away, unwilling to get involved in what they saw as playground drama rather than systematic harassment designed to break a child's spirit. At lunch, Maya sat in the bathroom stall, tears finally flowing as the weight of impossible odds crushed down on her 12-year-old shoulders. The eviction notice in her backpack said they had 18 hours left. 18 hours before the sheriff would come with papers and padlocks, before her family would join the growing list of black families destroyed by a system that profited from their pain. That night, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling of a bedroom that might not be hers much longer. The legal books scattered across her floor felt like monuments to her failure. Every door had been slammed. Every adult had dismissed her. The system was rigged, and she was just a little black girl with big dreams and no power. But in that darkness, something crystallized in Maya Washington's mind. A clarity born not from hope, but from fury, a determination forged in the fire of humiliation and tempered by the steel of injustice. If they wanted to destroy her family because she was asking questions, then she'd give them questions they'd never forget. If they thought a 12-year-old girl couldn't fight back, they were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. The eviction notice said they had 18 hours left. Maya intended to use every single minute to prepare for war. Maya stared at the eviction notice one final time before crumpling it into a ball. 18 hours. She could either spend those hours crying about the impossible odds, or she could do what no one expected. Fight back with everything she had. The Montgomery Public Library became her fortress. Maya arrived when the doors opened at 8 a.m., her arms loaded with notebooks and highlighters. While other kids played video games, she dove into the deepest corners of federal banking law with the intensity of a general preparing for battle. Civil Rights Act of 1968, she whispered to herself, spreading documents across 3 library tables. Fair Housing Act violations. Federal Banking Regulations, Section 12B4. Mrs. Lane, the librarian, approached with concern. Maya, sweetie, shouldn't you be in school? Mrs. Lane, did you know that under federal law, banks can't discriminate in lending based on race? And they have to prove borrowers agreed to loan modifications? The librarian watched in amazement as Maya connected dots that would challenge seasoned lawyers. This wasn't a child playing dress-up anymore. This was a brilliant mind operating at full capacity under desperate pressure. Maya's method was unlike anything taught in law school. She made colorful flowcharts showing the connection between forged documents and civil rights violations. She created timelines using rainbow markers, mapping out Blackstone's pattern of targeting black families. Her childlike approach to organization made complex legal concepts crystal clear. If they forged Daddy's signature, she reasoned aloud, they violated the Truth in Lending Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and the Fair Housing Act all at once. Hour by hour, Maya built her case like a puzzle. Each piece of evidence connected to another, forming a picture so clear that even Judge Hartwell wouldn't be able to ignore it. But knowledge wasn't enough. She needed someone to teach her how to present it. At 3 p.m., Maya walked 6 blocks to a small house on Elm Street, where Mrs. Elena Rodriguez lived in retirement. The 70-year-old former paralegal had spent 40 years fighting civil rights cases before the system wore her down. Maya had found her name in old court records and tracked her down through the phone book. "Child, what are you doing on my doorstep?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, opening the door to find a 12-year-old with determined eyes. "Ma'am, my name is Maya Washington. I need your help to save my family." Something in Maya's voice made Mrs. Rodriguez step aside and listen. For the next 2 hours, Maya laid out her case with precision that made the old woman's eyes widen in disbelief. "This is exactly what they did to us in the 60s, Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly. Same tactics, different decade. Will you teach me how to present this in court?" Mrs. Rodriguez studied the small girl before her, seeing something that reminded her of her younger self when she'd believed the law could create justice. "Child, you understand law better than lawyers twice your age, but do you understand what you're up against? I know they think I'm just a little girl who'll give up when things get hard. That's going to be their mistake." The training began immediately. In Mrs. Rodriguez's living room, Maya learned the rhythm of legal argument, the power of pause, and the importance of eye contact. They practiced until Maya's voice could command attention without shouting, until her presence could fill a room despite her small stature. "Your age isn't your weakness," Mrs. Rodriguez explained. "It's your secret weapon. They'll underestimate you until the moment you destroy them." As evening fell, Maya returned home to find her father packing their belongings into cardboard boxes. The sight broke her heart, but it also strengthened her resolve. "Daddy, don't pack another thing." James looked up from the box of family photos. "Baby girl, we have to face reality. The court hearing is tomorrow morning and we don't have a lawyer. Maya sat beside him on the couch, taking his large hands in her small ones. We do have a lawyer, Daddy. Me. Maya, I can't let you… Listen to me. Maya's voice carried an authority that made James stop mid-sentence. I found evidence that they forged your signature. Not just yours, but dozens of other families, too. This is systematic fraud, and I can prove it. She showed him her color-coded charts, her timeline of violations, her analysis of banking regulations. James stared at his daughter's work with growing amazement. How did you learn all this? The same way I learned everything else. I read, I studied, and I refused to accept that being smart wasn't good enough just because I'm young and black. Maya spread out her final battle plan across the kitchen table. Every argument was mapped out, every piece of evidence organized, every legal citation memorized. She'd found their weakness and built a strategy to exploit it. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that courtroom and show Judge Hartwell what happens when you dismiss someone who knows exactly what you've been doing wrong. James looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw something that took his breath away. This wasn't his little girl anymore. This was a warrior, forged by injustice and sharpened by determination. What if they try to silence you again? Maya smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. Daddy, you can't silence the truth when it comes with evidence, and tomorrow, I'm bringing enough evidence to bury them all. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She rehearsed her opening statement in the mirror, practiced her cross-examination questions, and reviewed every regulation she would cite. By dawn, she had transformed from a desperate child into something far more dangerous, a legal mind with nothing left to lose. At 6 a.m., Maya put on her best dress, the one she wore to church on Easter, and stood before her reflection one final time. The little girl who'd been dismissed and humiliated was gone. In her place stood Maya Washington, legal counsel, ready to prove that justice doesn't have an age requirement. They wanted to play games with my family, she said to her reflection. Now let's see how they handle playing against someone who's memorized all the rules they've been breaking. The courthouse opened in 3 hours. Maya intended to be first in line, armed with evidence that would turn their world upside down. The battle for the Washington family was about to become a war for justice itself, and the most dangerous weapon in that courtroom would be carried by the person they least expected to fight back. Maya's breakthrough came at 9:47 p.m. in the basement archives of Montgomery County Records, where she'd convinced the night janitor to let her do homework among the dusty filing cabinets. Her small flashlight cut through the darkness as she searched through boxes that hadn't been opened in years. Washington James. Washington James, she whispered, her fingers walking through alphabetized folders until she found her father's original loan application. Maya compared it to the loan modification papers that had started this nightmare, her sharp 12-year-old eyes catching details that adults had missed. The signatures were different, subtle, but wrong. The J in James slanted left instead of right. The W in Washington had an extra loop. Someone had tried to copy her father's signature, but they'd made mistakes. They forged it, Maya whispered to the empty room. They actually forged Daddy's signature. But forgery was just the beginning. Maya's obsessive research habits kicked into overdrive as she cross-referenced the loan modification date with court records. Judge Hartwell had approved the foreclosure 3 days after the modification was supposedly signed. 3 days wasn't enough time for proper processing unless someone had fast-tracked it. Maya's heart pounded as she realized what she'd stumbled onto. This wasn't just one family being cheated. This was systematic. She spent the next hour pulling files for every foreclosure case Judge Hartwell had approved in the past 2 years. Name after name, family after family, all with the same pattern. Minority homeowners, mysterious loan modifications, forged signatures, and rubber-stamped approvals. The Johnson family on Oak Street. the Martinez family on Pine Avenue, the Williams family on Cedar Drive. 73 families in total, all following the exact same script. Maya photographed each document with her phone, building a digital library of evidence. But the most damning discovery was still hidden behind the Williams file, a manila envelope marked Consulting Agreements, Confidential. Inside were payment records that made her stomach drop. Margaret Hartwell, the judge's wife, had received monthly payments from Blackstone Development totaling over $200,000 in consulting fees for something called Community Impact Assessment. The payments coincided perfectly with every accelerated foreclosure approval. Maya stared at the smoking gun in her hands. This wasn't just fraud. This was corruption at the highest level, a conspiracy between a judge and a developer to systematically steal homes from black families. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Where are you? It's almost 11 p.m. Maya quickly photographed the payment records and slipped the documents back into their folders. But the night's discoveries weren't over. Walking through the courthouse parking garage to meet her father, Maya heard familiar voices echoing off the concrete walls. She ducked behind a concrete pillar and pulled out her phone as Judge Hartwell's voice carried clearly through the empty space. "The Washington hearing is tomorrow morning. Just rubber stamp the foreclosure like always." "What about the girl?" Richard Blackstone's voice was unmistakable. "She's been asking too many questions." "She's 12 years old, Richard. What's she going to do? File a motion in crayon?" Both men laughed, their voices carrying the casual confidence of people who'd never faced consequences for their actions. "I want this family destroyed tomorrow. Make an example of them. Show the whole community what happens when these people get ideas above their station." Maya's hands shook as she held her phone, recording every word. The conspiracy she'd suspected was now confession, captured in digital clarity that would be impossible to deny. Maya walked to her father's car with evidence that could bring down a system of corruption that had destroyed dozens of families. She had forged documents, payment records, and recorded confessions. Tomorrow morning, Judge Hartwell expected to face a desperate family begging for mercy. Instead, he would face a 12-year-old prosecutor armed with evidence of his own crimes. Maya walked through the courthouse doors carrying a briefcase almost as big as she was. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating a scene that would have been comical if the stakes weren't so high. A 12-year-old in her Easter dress, surrounded by lawyers in $1,000 suits. The gallery was packed. Word had spread about the child lawyer, and reporters filled the back rows with cameras ready to capture what most assumed would be a humiliating spectacle. Maya's classmates had even skipped school to watch her fail, their phones recording as she made her way to the counsel table. "Look at baby lawyer," someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Judge Hartwell entered with the swagger of a man who'd never lost a foreclosure case. He glanced at Maya with the same dismissive contempt he'd shown yesterday, clearly expecting this to be over in minutes. "Your Honor," the corporate lawyer began, his voice dripping with condescension, "before we waste the court's time, I move to dismiss counsel for lack of standing. This child cannot represent anyone in a court of law." Maya stood up, and the briefcase seemed to dwarf her even more. But when she spoke, her voice cut through the courtroom chatter with surprising clarity. "Your Honor, under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 11 and Alabama Code Section 3436, any person may represent family members in civil proceedings provided they demonstrate competent understanding of the law." The laughter stopped. Judge Hartwell's eyebrows raised slightly. Maya had just cited law most practicing attorneys would need to look up. "Furthermore," Maya continued, "I submit to the court a motion for legal standing accompanied by a brief demonstrating my competency in federal banking regulations, fair housing law, and constitutional equal protection statutes." She handed a perfectly formatted legal document to the bailiff, who looked confused about accepting papers from someone who could still order from the kids' menu. The corporate lawyers exchanged nervous glances as they realized this wasn't going to be the easy victory they'd expected. Judge Hartwell scanned Maya's motion, his confident expression slowly shifting to surprise. The legal language was flawless, the citations accurate, the arguments sophisticated. This wasn't crayon scribbling. This was real legal work. "Motion for standing is granted," he said reluctantly, clearly frustrated that he couldn't dismiss her on technicalities. Maya opened her briefcase and pulled out color-coded folders, organizing them on the table with the efficiency of a seasoned attorney. The visual was striking, a child's organizational system containing adult-level legal analysis. "Your Honor, I move to present new evidence regarding fraudulent practices in the plaintiff's foreclosure claim." The corporate lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This is clearly a delay tactic by an unqualified representative." "Overruled," Judge Hartwell said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'll hear what the counsel has to say." Maya stood behind the podium, which came up to her chest, requiring her to look up at the judge like a child asking permission. But her opening statement shattered every assumption in that room. "Your Honor, my father's loan was illegally modified without his knowledge or consent in violation of the Truth in Lending Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. She held up a document that dwarfed her small hands. "This is my father's original loan application, signed in his own hand. This is the modification that triggered foreclosure proceedings." Maya paused for effect, letting the tension build. "The signatures don't match. Someone forged my father's name to justify a foreclosure that violates federal banking regulations." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Hartwell banged his gavel, but Maya could see sweat forming on his forehead. The corporate lawyers were frantically whispering among themselves, clearly unprepared for actual legal challenges from their 12-year-old opponent. "Furthermore, Your Honor, this isn't an isolated incident. I've discovered a pattern of similar forgeries targeting 73 minority families in this jurisdiction, all approved by this court with suspicious speed." The gallery gasped. Reporters leaned forward, phones recording every word. Maya's father watched with a mixture of pride and terror as his little girl systematically dismantled a corruption scheme that had destroyed dozens of families. "These are serious accusations," Judge Hartwell said, his voice tight. "Do you have proof of these claims?" Maya smiled, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, she looked exactly like what she was, a 12-year-old who'd just outmaneuvered the adults who'd dismissed her. "Yes, Your Honor, I have extensive proof." She began pulling documents from her briefcase, each one labeled and organized with the meticulous care of someone who understood that preparation was her only weapon against a rigged system. The corporate lawyer tried one more desperate objection. "Your Honor, we're expected to take the word of a child over established financial institutions." Maya looked directly at him, her young voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "Sir, you're not being asked to take my word for anything. You're being asked to examine evidence that proves your client committed fraud." Judge Hartwell called a 15-minute recess, his face pale as he realized the child he'd planned to humiliate had just trapped him in his own courtroom. As the gallery buzzed with excitement, Maya organized her evidence for the battle ahead. The war was just beginning, and the most dangerous weapon in that courtroom was carried by the person everyone had underestimated. "All rise! The court is in recess for 15 minutes. The gavel's echo hadn't even faded before Judge Hartwell stormed off the bench, his black robes billowing like storm clouds. Maya watched him disappear into his chambers, knowing that behind that door panic was setting in. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushed toward Maya, cameras flashing like lightning as they tried to capture the 12-year-old who'd just challenged the entire judicial system. Her classmates, who'd come to watch her fail, now stared in stunned silence at someone they barely recognized. "Maya! Maya! How did you learn to argue like that? shouted a TV reporter, shoving a microphone toward her face. Before Maya could answer, the corporate lawyers surrounded her like predators circling wounded prey. The lead attorney, Thomas Crawford III, leaned down with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Little girl, you're way over your head. This isn't a school debate. These are real consequences for real people." Maya looked up at the man whose family name was carved into courthouse marble, her small hands still clutching her evidence folders. "Mr. Crawford, are you threatening a minor in a courthouse?" "I'm offering friendly advice. Your father could lose a lot more than his house if you keep making these wild accusations." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Maya felt the familiar fear creep up her spine, the same terror that had kept her awake for weeks. But something had changed during her opening argument. Something had crystallized when she'd seen Judge Hartwell's fear. "Sir, I'm not making accusations, I'm presenting evidence. There's a difference." Crawford's smile turned predatory. "Evidence can be misinterpreted by inexperienced eyes. Children sometimes see conspiracies where there are just normal business practices." Behind him, Richard Blackstone emerged from the gallery with two men in expensive suits who looked more like bodyguards than lawyers. They positioned themselves around Maya's table, their presence unmistakably intimidating. "Miss Washington," Blackstone's voice was silk wrapped around steel, "perhaps we could discuss a settlement that benefits everyone." Maya's father started to stand, but Maya caught his arm. "What kind of settlement, Mr. Blackstone?" "A generous relocation package. Enough money to start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere far from Montgomery County." The offer was clear. Take the money and disappear, or face the consequences of fighting a system with unlimited resources and no scruples about destroying a 12-year-old girl. "And if I refuse?" Blackstone's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Little girls who play in adult games sometimes get hurt in adult ways." The courtroom had gone quiet around them, everyone straining to hear the hushed conversation that would determine Maya's fate. Her father's hand found hers, squeezing gently in a gesture that said both, "I'm proud of you," and "I'm terrified for you." Meanwhile, in the gallery, Maya's support system was crumbling. Mrs. Rodriguez, her elderly mentor, was being questioned by court security about her involvement in coaching a minor for legal fraud. Neighbors who'd come to support the Washington family whispered nervously among themselves. "Maybe the girl should just take the money," Maya heard Mrs. Johnson say. "This is getting dangerous." "She's just a baby," added Mr. Martinez. "She doesn't understand what she's up against." Even Maya's father was wavering. James Washington looked at his daughter's small face, then at the powerful men surrounding them like wolves, and felt the weight of impossible choices. "Baby girl," he whispered, "maybe we should listen to them. I can't let them hurt you." Maya felt the moment slipping away like sand through her fingers. The fear was real. The threats were real. The power arrayed against them was more vast than she'd imagined. She was 12 years old, and suddenly she felt every day of those 12 years pressing down on her shoulders. But then she remembered something Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her. The law doesn't care how scared you are. It only cares whether you're right. Maya looked around the courtroom, at the reporters watching her every move, at her classmates recording with their phones, at the gallery full of families who'd suffered the same injustices her family faced. This moment wasn't just about saving her house anymore. This was about whether a 12-year-old girl with nothing but truth and evidence could stand up to a system designed to crush people like her family. Judge Hartwell emerged from his chambers, his face flushed and his hands shaking slightly. Behind him, Maya caught a glimpse of his phone screen. He'd been making calls during the recess, calls to people who could make problems disappear. "All rise. Court is back in session." As everyone returned to their seats, Maya felt the weight of the moment. The next few minutes would determine not just her family's fate, but whether justice was just a word carved in marble or something worth fighting for. She stood up, her small frame dwarfed by the enormity of the moment, and prepared to continue a battle that had already cost her childhood and might cost her everything else. The question hanging in the air was simple. Would a system built on power and corruption bow to truth spoken by someone it considered powerless? Maya was about to find out. Judge Hartwell returned to his bench like a man walking to his execution, his earlier confidence replaced by barely controlled desperation. Maya stood at the podium, her small hands steady as she prepared to deliver the legal argument that would either save her family or destroy them completely. Your Honor, I will now present evidence of systematic civil rights violations that require immediate federal investigation. The words hit the courtroom like a thunderbolt. Federal investigation meant outside oversight, something Judge Hartwell had spent 30 years avoiding. His face went pale as Maya opened her first folder. This is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, Maya began, her young voice carrying the authority of constitutional law. Under Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act, any person who, under color of state law, deprives another of constitutional rights may be held liable. She held up a chart showing the demographics of foreclosed families, her colorful graphs making the discrimination unmistakably clear. 73 families. 71 were minorities. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Your Honor, this court has approved foreclosures on minority families at a rate of 847% higher than the statistical average for similar economic demographics. Crawford jumped up. Objection. This child is presenting unsupported statistical analysis. Mr. Crawford, Maya interrupted, her 12-year-old voice cutting through his legal bluster. These numbers come from your own court records. Are you objecting to your own documentation? The gallery gasped. A 12-year-old had just made a seasoned attorney look foolish in open court. Judge Hartwell's gavel hand trembled as he overruled the objection. Maya moved to her second folder, pulling out the smoking gun evidence with the precision of a surgeon. Furthermore, Your Honor, I present evidence of direct financial corruption violating federal anti-bribery statutes. She held up the payment records showing $200,000 in consulting fees to Margaret Hartwell. The documents were blown up on poster board, visible to everyone in the courtroom. These payments from Blackstone Development to Judge Hartwell's wife coincide exactly with the approval dates of every questionable foreclosure in this jurisdiction. Judge Hartwell's face went from pale to red. Those are private financial records obtained illegally. Your Honor, Maya's voice remained calm despite the storm erupting around her. These are public records filed with the county clerk's office. I obtained them through legitimate research. The trap was perfect. Judge Hartwell had just admitted knowledge of payments he should have disclosed, destroying any claim of ignorance. But Maya wasn't finished. She turned to face Richard Blackstone directly, her young eyes blazing with righteous fury. Mr. Blackstone, you're under oath. Did your company make payments to Judge Hartwell's wife while seeking favorable rulings in foreclosure cases? Crawford leaped up. Objection! This child cannot cross-examine. I'm not cross-examining, Maya said smoothly. I'm presenting evidence. Mr. Blackstone, these are your company's own financial records. Blackstone's confident demeanor cracked. Caught between perjury and confession, he chose the path that would destroy him. Those were legitimate consulting fees for community impact assessment. What community impact did Mrs. Hartwell assess? Maya pressed. According to her biography in the Country Club newsletter, she's a retired piano teacher with no background in urban planning, economics, or real estate development. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Maya had just dismantled a corruption scheme with the methodical precision of a federal prosecutor, and she was barely tall enough to see over the podium. But her final revelation would bring the entire system crashing down. Maya pulled out her phone and connected it to the courtroom's speaker system with help from a stunned bailiff. Your Honor, I present audio evidence of criminal conspiracy recorded in this courthouse's parking garage yesterday evening. Judge Hartwell's voice filled the courtroom with crystal clarity. I want this family destroyed tomorrow. Make an example of them. Show these people what happens when they get ideas above their station." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in that courtroom heard a sitting judge admit to using his position to destroy families based on racial prejudice. "These people?" Maya repeated, her young voice cutting through the shocked silence. "Your Honor, which people exactly were you referring to?" Judge Hartwell sat frozen, trapped by his own recorded words. The mask of judicial dignity had fallen away, revealing the corrupt bigot underneath. Crawford made one final desperate attempt. "Your Honor, this recording was obtained without consent. In Alabama, only one-party consent is required for recording," Maya responded without missing a beat. "As the person being threatened, I had every legal right to document criminal conspiracy." Maya turned to face the packed courtroom, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of every person present. "Your Honor, this case isn't about foreclosure anymore. It's about whether our legal system will protect civil rights or continue enabling systematic oppression. It's about whether justice belongs to everyone or just to people with enough money to buy it." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her final blow. "I'm 12 years old, and I know the law better than the adults who've been breaking it. That should terrify everyone in this room." Judge Hartwell sat in stunned silence, his 30-year career in ruins, destroyed by a child with a smartphone and an unshakable belief in justice. The most powerful people in Montgomery County had just been checkmated by someone who still needed a step stool to reach the microphone. The silence stretched like a held breath before Judge Hartwell's world collapsed completely. His hands shook as he stared at evidence that a 12-year-old girl had assembled to destroy his career. "This court," his voice cracked, barely audible. "This court finds motion to dismiss foreclosure proceedings granted." The words fell like hammer blows. Maya's small shoulders straightened as enormous weight lifted from them. "Furthermore, this court orders immediate investigation into all foreclosure cases approved in the past 3 years for evidence of fraudulent documentation." The gallery erupted. Families who'd lost their homes wept with joy, realizing they might get them back. Mrs. Johnson grabbed Mr. Martinez's hand, both sobbing as 3 years of devastation suddenly looked reversible. Maya wasn't finished. Her young voice cut through celebration with laser precision. "Your Honor, I also move that this court refer evidence of judicial corruption and civil rights violations to the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Judge Hartwell's face went ashen. FBI investigation meant federal crimes and federal prison. Motion granted. He'd just signed his own arrest warrant at a 12-year-old's demand. Federal agents moved toward Richard Blackstone, blocking his escape. The man who'd threatened a child now wore handcuffs in that same courthouse. Maya's father rushed forward, tears streaming as he swept his daughter into his arms. "Baby girl, you did it. We did it, Daddy. All of us together." Media swarmed around them as headlines wrote themselves. 12-year-old exposes judicial corruption. Child genius saves 73 families. Maya found herself surrounded by grateful families whose homes she'd saved. Mrs. Martinez knelt to her eye level, voice choked with emotion. "Mija, you gave us our lives back. How do we thank you?" Maya's answer was pure 12-year-old wisdom. By helping the next family who needs someone to fight for them. Mrs. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd with radiating pride. "Child, you proved the law works when people are brave enough to use it." Outside, celebration continued on courthouse steps where Maya had once stood dismissed. A reporter thrust a microphone toward her. "How does it feel to defeat the entire system?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I didn't defeat the system. I proved the system works when people follow the law instead of breaking it." Her words would be quoted in law schools for generations. James watched his daughter with amazement bordering on awe. "Maya, how did you know you could do this?" Maya smiled with the uncomplicated joy of a 12-year-old who'd accomplished something extraordinary. "I didn't know, Daddy. I just knew we deserved better, and I wasn't going to stop fighting until we got it." 6 months later, Maya Washington stood before a packed auditorium at Roosevelt Middle School. But this time, she wasn't alone and dismissed. She was the keynote speaker for the school's first annual Youth Advocacy Day, invited by the same principal who'd once suggested she needed therapy for her unrealistic expectations. The transformation was remarkable. The shy 7th grader who'd been mocked in hallways now commanded attention from students, parents, and educators who hung on every word. Behind her on the stage sat a banner reading, "Age is just a number, justice has no limits." 6 months ago, adults told me I was too young to understand the law, Maya began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd faced down corruption and won. "They said I should focus on being a kid, leave grown-up problems to grown-ups." She paused, looking out at faces that included many of her former bullies, now listening with respectful attention. "But here's what I learned. Your voice matters no matter how old you are. The Constitution doesn't have an age requirement for truth. Justice doesn't check your birth certificate before deciding whether you deserve it." In the audience, families who'd gotten their homes back because of Maya's courage nodded with tears in their eyes. Mrs. Martinez sat with her children, all of them living in the house they'd thought was lost forever. "Adults don't always know better," Maya continued, her words carrying weight that would have been impossible just months earlier. "Sometimes they need kids to teach them what they forgot about right and wrong. Sometimes they need us to remind them that the law belongs to everyone, not just people with money and power." The auditorium fell silent as Maya's message hit home. In the back row, Mrs. Rodriguez wiped away proud tears, watching her former student inspire a new generation of young advocates. "If you see something wrong, speak up. If someone tells you you're too young to make a difference, prove them wrong. If they say the system can't be changed, show them what happens when someone who knows the law decides to use it." Maya's voice grew stronger with each word, carrying the authority of someone who'd tested these principles in the highest stakes possible and emerged victorious. "What injustice will you refuse to accept? What excuse will you stop using to fight for what's right?" The standing ovation that followed wasn't just applause. It was the sound of young people realizing their own power to create change. Later that evening, Maya sat in her bedroom, which looked remarkably similar to 6 months earlier. Law books still crowded her desk, but now they were joined by Harvard Law School preparatory materials and letters from civil rights organizations across the country. Her father knocked on the doorframe. "How's my little lawyer doing?" Maya looked up from her constitutional law homework, advanced reading that would prepare her for early admission to law school at age 16. "I'm not little anymore, Daddy, and I'm not done being a lawyer yet." On her wall hung a framed photograph from the courthouse steps on the day justice won. In it, Maya stood surrounded by the 73 families whose homes she'd saved, her small frame at the center of a community that had learned to believe in the power of truth. Below the photograph was a handwritten note in Maya's careful script. "Everyone deserves someone willing to fight for them. Everyone includes me. Everyone includes you." The story of Maya Washington proved that courage doesn't require age, wisdom doesn't require experience, and justice doesn't require permission from anyone. Her legacy wasn't just the corruption she'd exposed or the families she'd saved. It was the proof that when someone refuses to accept injustice, when they arm themselves with knowledge and stand up with truth, they can change the world. The question isn't whether you're old enough or qualified enough to fight for what's right. The question is, are you brave enough to try? Maya Washington was 12 when she answered that question with a resounding yes. What's your answer? If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to remember that their voice matters. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice. Because somewhere right now, there's another Maya Washington discovering they have the power to change everything. The law belongs to all of us. Use it.